Hey everybody, I am Chef Chaya-Ryvka from thelivingvision.com, back with you today from Living Tree Community Foods. And my special guest has fallen asleep. This is Hodaya, a Ketriel. And so I might be dancing a little bit back here as we go through this video. So I hope I don't make you dizzy. But if you make this food, it'll center you right back and fill your tummies with all sorts of goodness. So the recipe today is a ginger miso dressing, and I'm using it on some kale. So my favorite way to use this dressing is actually to make kale chips, but it's so good as a salad as well, and I know that some of you may not have a dehydrator, but if you do have a dehydrator, then I highly, highly recommend using whatever doesn't get eaten right away to turn into kale chips, or just make a nice big batch of kale chips. So one recipe of this ginger miso dressing will dress 2 large bunches of kale. And we'll go over the kale part of it later. Let's just start with making our dressing. So using a high-speed blender, you actually could use your a regular blender if you don't have a high-speed blender. You just may want to shave down your ginger and garlic a little further so that it's crushed, so that you don't have any chunks of that left in your blender or left in the dressing when you're ready to use the dressing. So what we're going to start with first is a little bit of water. So I have some purified water here. And I'm just going to measure out a 1/2 cup right in my blender. There's a 1/2 cup of water. And it's a slightly creamy dressing, and what we're using to cream up this dressing is some of Living Tree's wonderful sesame butter or tahini. So, excuse my body movements. I've got a 1/4 cup here of the raw tahini, also known as sesame butter. And the next ingredient that I'll be adding is the miso. So there's actually no added salt to this. Our salt is just the miso. I'm using a red miso here. Any more mellow miso would work perfectly as well. White miso, red miso. And the miso that you want to buy is the stuff that is refrigerated. You don't want to buy the pasteurized or the cooked miso that's on the shelf. You want to buy the miso that is in the refrigerated section. And so there is 2 tablespoons of some red miso. Now I'm also going to add some of Living Tree's dark amber maple syrup, which gives this dressing a really nice sweetness and a real depth of flavor. It balances out very nicely all of these flavors. So it's a very well-rounded dressing with sweet and salt and a little spicy and a little tart on that bitter green. Is just great. So what I have here is some coconut vinegar. Living Tree Community Foods does sell some coconut vinegar that you have right there. And if you don't have coconut vinegar and you want to make this, but you do have apple cider vinegar, you could use that as well. But my recipe is using 1 tablespoon of the coconut vinegar, so I would start with a little less, and then if you're using apple cider vinegar, and then add some if you feel like it needs some more tartness. And for some added richness, add a 1/4 cup of olive oil to the recipe. We're also going to be using 2 teaspoons of fresh squeezed lime juice. And the 2 final ingredients are our chopped ginger, giving it a nice ginger spicy flavor. And that's 2 tablespoons of chopped ginger. Now, if you're using a household blender, you could measure out about 2 tablespoons. Maybe it would be about 1 inch or 1.5 inches of a piece of ginger root, and then grate that down a little further so that your blender can break that up completely. And then I have 1 teaspoon of garlic, chopped garlic, and that would probably end up being about a large clove, a medium to a large clove of garlic. Okay, so those are all the dressing ingredients, and now we are going to blend this until it is this creamy, smooth consistency. So here we go. Okay, so here I have some kale that has been torn in the bowl, and that's how I would prepare my kale if I'm going to be using it for a salad. However, if you have a dehydrator and you want to turn these into kale chips, then what you want to do is try and keep the leaf of your kale as whole as possible, because it's going to dehydrate down, and if you've torn it up, then you might end up with a lot of little crumbles. But in order to have a nice big chip, you want to keep your leaf as whole as possible. And the easiest way to de-stem your kale is actually just to hold your kale from the base of the stem, and then using the other hand just squeeze on that stem and pull back as you squeeze, working your way up to the top until it finally breaks off. So you see it keeps a good section of that kale whole. And for kale chips, I would keep it just like that. However, if you're making a salad, then you want to tear that and break it down just a little bit. You can even chop it or shred it to be smaller pieces, but I actually like the flavor of, or I like the texture of the kale in larger chunks. So I'll show you that again. I'm squeezing the bottom of the kale down here, holding the stem, and then squeezing it with the other hand, and just pulling back until that kale pops off the stem. And one more time, do that. There you go. Now these stems are so filled with nutrients and chlorophyll and all sorts of good stuff that if you have a juicer or even your high-speed blender, I recommend keeping those and juicing them, or put them in your blender. It's a quite bitter flavor, but you could add a little apple and cucumber and celery, and you don't have to waste any part of that kale. So for today, I'm just going to pull out these larger pieces of kale. Today we're going to make the salad. So like I said at the beginning, this recipe will dress 2 large heads of kale. I only have about 3/4 of a medium head of kale in here, so I'm not going to use the entire batch of the dressing. I'm just going to pour a bit of the dressing on it. And all bunches of kale are going to be different, or if you grow your kale, it's going to be different. So just dress your salad to a level that you enjoy the flavor, and if you're making kale chips, that's the exact amount that you would use to make kale chips as well. So just dress it like you would dress a salad. And then we'll just toss. It's quite interesting for me to toss a salad with a baby on me. So excuse me if I look a little awkward doing this. And I oftentimes use my hands while doing this, but I don't have a sink in here to wash up right now, so I'm just tossing it with these wooden spoons. And you want to get that covered really nicely. Another thing that I've done with this salad, if you're a lover of dulse and want another added punch of minerals, is I've sprinkled a nice helping of dulse over this, and I'll even do that before making my kale chips, so that they are topped off with dulse, and it adds another dimension in the flavor, but it also adds a very nice spectrum of minerals, because as we know, all those ocean plants are filled with minerals. So there we go, that's tossed pretty well. And in order that you can see it a little better, I'll just put this into a bowl here. Oops. Make a little mess at the same time. There we go. That's our kale salad. And I'll just give it a little taste. And it's absolutely delicious. You're really going to love this dressing if you like nice, sweet, spicy ginger flavors. So I hope you'll make it. Enjoy your kale with the whole family. And this is Chef Chaya-Ryvka, sous chef Hodaya, who is dreaming of kale salads right now. And Living Tree Community Foods, thank you for joining us. We'll see you again. Bye-bye.